So if we're being honest with ourselves, and we meaning me, there are certain guests, there are certain episodes I look forward to a little bit more than others. And we can all assume that Mike Giardi is on the lower end of this spectrum as episodes you just kind of have to do. You got to eat your vegetables. But on the dessert end of episodes that I like to look forward to, Dan Pizzuta, first-time guest on the Pats Interference podcast. You can read him at the 33rd Team. You've heard him on the Mina Kimes show featuring Lenny. And This Is Football with Kevin Clark, one of the smartest follows I have on Twitter or elsewhere, covering the league at large, diving into the numbers. Dan, thank you again for making time. I'm excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be talking about a team that's been a little busy over the past couple days.
Yeah, so we are recording Friday, midday, full disclosure. And my plan is to bank this for Monday so that the people have something to listen to when they wake up. And the idea here is let's just go quick hitters because we've done the big free agency signings, and we'll get into that. We've teased a little bit of the draft. We're going to do that as well. But what I want to do today is take your national perspective as someone who's very balanced and reasonable and has insights into things that I think often get overlooked and say, okay, where do the Patriots fit in now to the NFL? Because the optimist would say, oh my God, the defense is going to be top 10, with all these signings. And we still obviously have the draft to come and trades, et cetera, et cetera. Others would go, hey, is this still the same team that needs a left tackle and a number one and number two receiver for a third year running? And I'd be like, yeah, it is. So when you consider all the coaching movement, all the free agent movement, just right now, as it stands, again, Friday, March 14th, where do you expect the biggest change between the 2024 Patriots as we saw them and the next version we see when they kick off September 7th, 8th, 9th, whatever?
Yeah, I think on like the highest level, it's just going to be kind of competency around places, because I think there were a lot of places last year where you just kind of looked at them and they didn't quite either know what they were doing, or there were just pieces that they were not the sum of their parts at times last year. And it could be somewhat frustrating as someone on the outside, probably very much as someone on the inside to watch. So with the coaching changes, I think is definitely going to be a big one where you're not going to have a poorly coached Mike Vrabel team. I just don't think that is a possibility just based on what he has done in his previous stop. So I think there are just going to be, it's going to be a lot better in structure. And I think that's going to also help, Josh McDaniels on offense too. I just think it's going to be well structured in cases that I don't think that quite translated to what they were hoping for last year.
So it's interesting, Dan, because we've been talking about credibility in New England and how much he lends to that because of the record in Tennessee, his record as an underdog as a head coach, game management things. But there's also a credibility that you just kind of feel and hear directly from people in the league. Like when you and I weren't throwing back beers at the combine, I'm asking agents, like, how was it meeting, with Mike? What was the meetings like? How did he pitch things? And it was very much respect level. And we heard from free agents this past week, there's an attraction, and it's kind of what you say in those press conferences. But I think there's an understanding from people closer than we are, hey, this is real. Like there's a respect level and there is a gravity for certain people that want to work with Mike Vrabel. And if you're on the opposite side, you come to expect certain things. So what are those things when you reflect on his time at Tennessee that you expect to show up first in New England? Like, okay, this is a Mike Vrabel team and you know it because of X, Y, and Z, not just because of what people are saying around the league.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's just like the little details, which I think are just going to be something where whether it's, he's not, it's weird to talk about Vrabel because he is in one sense like a Belichick tree guy, but never coached under him, right? So you do still have a lot of the things he learned as a player, but he also does have a lot of things that he learned kind of in all his other stops of where he was coaching. But I think what he has gotten, and I think is most closely related to what he learned under Belichick when he was a player, is just how those little details just kind of expand into the responsibility for everything else. So it's just the way he thinks about things, and a lot of the game management things. I remember back the one time where there was that Tennessee Patriots game where him and Belichick kind of went back and forth between some of those game management things, either taking a delay a game and kind of having those. It's just going to be those things, and I think that just kind of sets the tone from the top down, and that is good, just going to kind of trickle down into a lot of the other things. Like when you look at, Drake Maye, who a first year just trying to figure out how to do the job. If you have someone like a Mike Vrabel already knows how to do the job and now can kind of focus on some of the finer details, getting things more prepared. And I just think that is going to be what we see a lot from this team, more so than what we saw last year.
So this isn't on the list of things that I sent you. Hey, let's cover this. We're going to do our quick hitters here coming up in a second. But what you just brought up, that instance of game management where the Titans were running off the clock in that wild card game, and the way the Patriots had done to the Jets, and Bill's got this big smirk when he's killing the Jets and just twisting the knife and throwing more ghosts at Sam Darnold. When Vrabel did that to him, obviously he's furious. But the reason I think that's a good point is because Mike has surrounded himself historically with excellent assistants. And he has this now in the way that Belichick did, where Ernie Adams used to do that high up in the booth for Bill. And now he has Stretch, who's become this very popular figure. We're all learning a bit more about John Stryker, who's our VP of football operations and strategy. So for Vrabel, it's not just that you have, as Belichick did, and Ernie Adams, it's that you're hiring the right coaches around him. Like we talked about this plenty. Matt LaFleur, Arthur Smith is the offensive coordinators in Tennessee. Mike Vrabel now has Josh McDaniels. He has Terrell Williams. Like Doug Marone's your offensive line coach. And we'll see how that goes. But your ability to surround yourself with good coaches, something Drake Maye couldn't do last year because of a network. So it's not just the head coach, but who can you pull, who's in your network. And then Bill's circle just got tinier and tinier in the last few years, where he wasn't surrounded by Romeo Crennel, Dante Scarnecchia, the Bill O'Briens anymore at the end, and that's when they faltered. All of which is to ask you, of the assistants off the top of your head, and I listed a couple, are there any that you think people should talk a little bit more about, or you admired from afar when you consider the work that they had done, whether it's Williams or McDaniels or Doug Marrone? I mean, Todd Downing's probably lower in the list, but you get my point. Like that's an example of where it's not just Vrabel will show up, but this assistant coach.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what they are going to be successfully as a team is going to lend to like what Josh McDaniels is again as an offensive coordinator. Obviously, we've seen him be very successful as an offensive coordinator. I think when he goes off to kind of do his own thing and try to be the top guy, that hasn't worked quite as well. So how I think McDaniels is going to translate to what Drake Maye does well, what this offense is going to do well. I think a lot of that, like I think Vrabel probably could have hired anyone as defensive coordinator. But I am interested to see, what Terrell Williams is going to do. But I just think when you have kind of either that defensive head coach or that, CEO style head coach, who the offensive coordinator is I think the second most important position, regardless of who those people are. So I think, how McDaniels comes back to be this version of himself is going to be, I think, either like really raise the ceiling or set the floor for, I think, what this team could potentially be.
Do you buy the offensive coordinator like year abroad or year sabbatical? Like Cliff Kingsbury went to Thailand. Whatever Thailand did to Cliff Kingsbury, he came back more handsome and more brilliant as an offensive mind because they're cooking with gas in Washington. Like McDaniels supposedly hopped around to colleges in the NFL. If there are changes, what do you think they may or may not look like based on their current personnel? Or is this just a thing we like to talk about in the media?
Yeah, I think it certainly depends on the person. I think we've seen, Mike McCarthy very famously did his, sabbatical at PFF. Said he watched everything and learned a whole lot. And then when he got back to the Cowboys, it wasn't really much different from Green Bay, Mike McCarthy. So right. I think it does depend on kind of the actual like self-reflection of the person. I think Cliff definitely did that a little bit, not just in Thailand, but I think learning some things at USC a little bit, even though that Caleb Williams offense that he was coordinating in his year there wasn't the greatest structurally, but I think that was a lot of personnel stuff too. But I do think he absolutely evolved as a play caller and kind of what he thought about schematically. It was way different than what he did in Arizona. So I think the fact that McDaniels did do that and, was not just sitting around on a Bill Belichick podcast like some of the other assistants were last year, I will say that would be potentially a positive. So I do think there could be some things that he's always, structurally been pretty good with some of the offensive stuff. It's not like that's an offensive system that has been stale. He's run a bunch of different things, even with the Patriots under Belichick, just based on who they've had in personnel. So I think him being that offensive coordinator, I think seeing what they have here is going to be something where he is able to adjust.
So when we look at what they have here, again, hit on it at the top, but I spent a lot of time in the last episode with Doug Hyde being like, okay, for agency, it's going well, but it's a little weird that we're still doing this needs talk and it's the same positions over and over again. Pick one, because I think the floor you mentioned has been raised with the coaching, but it's also tied to your offensive line and Josh McDaniels' menu of play calls and his personnel groupings is going to be tied to what you can do up front or what you can't do. So whether it's the offensive line or the receiving group, what would you do to fix it in the coming weeks, months? Is it even fixable for one of those two positions?
Yeah, I think the priority should be wide receiver right now, just because I think that is harder to fix at a top level. Because even the offensive line, it's okay to be okay along the offensive line. I think a lot of Patriots fans probably would like to be more than okay, but when, especially on the offensive line, if you are going from the worst in the league, close to it last year, to okay, that's fine, especially because the offensive line is really like a weak link system. If you have 3 really good guys, 2 really bad guys, you could still be a pretty bad offensive line because defenses will take advantage of who those weak links on that system are. So if you're just kind of average across the offensive line, you should be passable, especially with a quarterback like Drake Maye, who I think is actually very good at making up for some of his deficiencies along the offensive line. I think we saw the difference there when Maye was playing and when Jacoby Brissett was playing, a guy who will hold on to the ball a little longer, isn't quite as good as kind of avoiding pressure and avoiding sacks when that comes. So I think you can kind of shoot for average along the offensive line. Wide receiver, if your entire group is average, it's hard to have a very good offense that you're going to be able to do because you're not really winning one-on-ones. You're then relying very heavily on the scheme of these guys that have to get open. So if you can get a Cooper Kupp, again, he's not the guy that he was, in 2021, 2022. But just a guy like that who can shift coverages and kind of be this force multiplier to make everyone else's role on that offense easier. I think that is something that they should definitely be looking for. And I think that is harder to get right now, which is why I think they should put a little more effort into doing it.
Yeah, that sounds nice. I think you would fit very well in, Dan, with the Patriots beat in New England media, being like, hey, more attention to the receivers, please. And when we post this, I expect the Cooper Kupp business to be resolved. And I think things have died down when it comes down to, top suitors. And there was mutual interest, as my colleague Doug Hyde reported. Karen Garrigan has had. I mentioned he's asked around about what it would be like to live here, what a guy's like thinking of playing here. That's a different step. That's gathering intel and intrigue rather than full-on interest in pursuing something. Like you're asking about someone that you may or may not be interested in at the bar. Like, oh, what are they like? Versus going up to them and buying them a drink. So give me one or two other moves that you kind of like. And this could be any position. It could be trades. It could be free agent signings. If you want to jump to the draft because you have the love of this particular prospect, what are you doing, Dan Pizzuta, GM for a day of the New England Patriots?
I'd be interested in checking out what Andre James' situation is. Center from the Raiders, just released, played under Mike McDaniels. Now that you have the Patriots have released David Andrews, I think they have a couple internal options that they're bouncing around at center. But I think what we've seen is if you can kind of get that center situated for a young quarterback, I think it does make a lot of things easier along the offensive line, along what the quarterback is being asked to do at the line of scrimmage. And I think looking at it, Andre James, he was in and out of the lineup last year, a little bit injury. I know they wanted their draft pick to be playing, but he was 8th among interior linemen in ESPN's pass block win rate, which last year, which I think is going to be very nice for some Patriots fans to hear, an offensive lineman who can pass block. So when you have that, I think it does make some other things easier, especially on the guards, because then you can figure out your double teams and things and setting protections. He's a guy who's been around a little bit, again, has played under Josh McDaniels. Again, when Josh McDaniels is head coach, not sure if that's a positive or a negative, but does have the experience there. So I think looking at someone like that, who I think, again, is either only 27 or 28, I think it would be a nice veteran piece to put on that offensive line.
You mentioned ESPN's pass block win rate, which I think is a good standardized stat. Like, what it is. Here's the measurement. Are you holding on for 2.5 seconds?
Yeah, right.
How often are you doing that? How often are you not doing that? Boom, there's the numbers. Are there any because I wonder about this as we get more analytics and metrics, and this is not an anti-numbers rant, but it's just a question of like everything we can count is not always valuable. And there are always tiers of these metrics that we should be using, even though yards per route run is good. But then, Cooper Kupp is still a top 30 receiver by that metric, though. If you look at how often he gets open, for example, by ESPN's open rate, that's different. It's just like quick sidebar. Like numbers are a metric that is a go-to for you that you think more people should pay attention to, as we just have so many to pick from, is my point.
Yeah, I mean, for offensive line, it's interesting because pass block win rate and things like you said does have things in 2.5 seconds, and sometimes that can be a little deceiving of what you're actually looking at because there aren't a lot of football plays that happen within 2.5 seconds.
Yeah, or screens or draws, like things that
right.
That's not the job. It's to hold on for dear life. It's to actively shed someone. Like get out of here.
Right. Well, at least they do take screens and things like that out. But I think you kind of look at some of the things even with like Chicago's offensive line. I think a couple of years ago with Justin Fields, it was a pretty good line by pass block win rate, which was 2.5 seconds, but you're protecting for someone like Justin Fields, who's going to hold the ball for 3.5 seconds sometimes. So I think there was a lot of things where they gave up pressures there. So I think you just have to know what you're looking at and what that stat is actually telling you to kind of provide a little bit of the context too. Because something like a Ronnie Stanley was really good in pass block win rate this year, but Sports Info Solutions had him with a pretty high blown block rate. That's also the divide between 2.5 seconds and blocking for Lamar Jackson. So it's things like that. So I think just when you are looking at stats, know that there's no one be all end all stat for I think anything we look at.
Amen.
So if you are contextualizing, that's kind of what I try to do when I'm writing things like this. This is what this stat says. Here's why it might say that. Here's why it might be wrong. I think just kind of knowing what these stats are saying, what exactly they're looking at, and some of the flaws in them and the context that's needed to put them in perspective, I think it's just going to be really important as we continue to throw out numbers like this.
It's a great answer. That's why you're on here. That's why I read you. That's why I follow you. That's why other people should too. Real quick, as I continue to demonstrate my ADD as a host, but we have some breaking news. Speaking to the center question, do you have any thoughts on Wes Schweitzer, who has come in from the Jets? He's a guard center who is signing and following Todd Downing from the Jets to come to New England.
Ooh, that is...
If you don't, that's completely fine. I will also buy you some time as I demonstrate some better hosting skills and asking you questions that were not on the rundown. But it's something that Pollitt, jumped up against. We record just after noon on Friday, and clearly seems to be a little bit more of a depth piece. But he is a professional offensive lineman who's been around for a bit, and so Wes Schweitzer, come on in.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's just going to be a guy who's probably, going to serve some of that interior depth. 142 snaps over the past 2 years with the Jets. Was kind of up and down with the Commanders in 2022. Kind of last time I think he was a starter. So I think it's okay to be bringing in guys who are going to be serviceable veteran depth pieces. But I think if you're going to be relying on him to be a starter at any point, I would hope the Patriots aren't going to be doing that.
Okay, very good. He has a pulse and he can block, and he has put on an NFL helmet before. Welcome to New England, another offensive lineman. All right, last question, then we get to the quick hitters. We talked about all this and the coaching and some additions, and we haven't dived into the free agent signings except for Wes Schweitzer, of all people. The ceiling for the 2025 Patriots, if you had to guess, I have said they should push for a wild card spot. Push. And this is as much the new head coach, it's the new offensive coordinator. The floor is coming up. The year 2 leap, you would presume, from Drake Maye, unless he catches CJ Stroud-itis. And even that's tied to protection. But Drake Maye, apparently good running for his life and creating on his own. 7-8 wins, maybe 9 if you get some good breaks against what should be an easy schedule. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, I could see them as a potential wild card team. Like, because of the things you notice. I think if like the Broncos last year can become a wild card team and you kind of just look at that formula, it's a defense that brought in some pieces, clicked with the pieces they already have. I mean, the Broncos were, I think, the best defense in the league last year, if you look at a lot of different advanced stats. So I'm not sure how high the Patriots get there, if they can, be the best defense in the league. But I think if you can be a good defense and you're riding a good young quarterback, I think that does potentially give you the formula, basically, I think, in any season to be competitive. And I think, try to be around a wild card. So I think in a best case scenario, they definitely have the ceiling where they could be doing that, just because I do think they have some of the pieces in place on defense. I was someone who thought the defense wouldn't take that much of a step back last year just because of the talent they had. I think they were, top 5 in EPA per play in 2023, and that was with, missing a whole bunch of players. So I thought being a little healthier, and having some continuity with the coaching staff, which again turned out to be completely wrong. I think that might have been the most wrong I was on anything heading into last year. But I think now that you are rebuilding some of those pieces, I think that the defense should be better with that coaching. And then with a quarterback like Drake Maye, I think there's always that upside to be better than expected. So I think that'll put you in the wild card mix, I think.
I love it. Okay, good. That makes me feel better. I don't say that very often or to many guests that I even have it on the show, but it feels validating. Thank you, Dan. All right, quick break coming up. Then we are going to hit on free agency. What the Patriots should do at number 4 overall. Drake Maye will do blank next season, and a random Patriots take, which I have no idea what you're going to say. We'll be back right after this.
Enough about free agency. Enough about the draft. No more mocks, no more rumors, no more whispers, no more mailbag. It is time to talk, not about football or anything like that. Prizepicks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app, because when I'm not on this podcast and I'm sitting at home and I'm watching the Celtics, or it could be a hockey game, or it could be a baseball game. Sox are just around the corner. I am playing Prizepicks and I am winning. And I would like you, as someone who supports this podcast, to win a little bit too. Because right now at Prizepicks, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash and run your game all season long. When you build your lineup, you know the deal. 2 to 6 players, all right? Every single time you go to Prizepicks, online or on the app, you'll see a player and they'll have a stat. And all you have to do with your lineup is pick the player, go more or less on that stat. It could be Jason Tatum 5 threes. If you think he'll hit more than 5 threes, he's going to hit more. If you think Kristaps Porzingis will have less than 18 points, hit less. Boom. That's a lineup right there. So 2 to 6 player stat projections over at Prizepicks. Basketball, hockey, baseball around the corner. Of course, football will be back too. And when you sign up today, if you're a new customer, here's the best part. You get $50. 5-0 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup at Prizepicks. You don't even need to win to get the $50 bonus 5-0. You just have to play. So sign up today. Download the app and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and you will get $50 instantly with the promo code CLNS after you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, run your game.
All right, quick hitters time. Favorite Patriots free agent signing? Go.
I think just for who they got, like Milton Williams, it's obviously a lot of money, but when you are a team like the Patriots who had so much cap space, could have brought in anyone because they could have just used whoever they brought in. I think getting a young guy who has that type of pass rush potential, I had some concerns about him a little bit just because didn't have a lot of playing time, never played more than I think like 40% of the snaps. But now if you put him next to Christian Barmore, if he is again healthy, I think that quells some of those concerns a little bit. Does have a very good duo there, so I think that lessens some of the concerns that I had with him. But you get a 26-year-old who is that quick off the line in the interior of the defensive line. I'm not totally sure you can overpay that, especially if you're in a position that the Patriots were in.
I'm with you. And you talk about force multipliers, like
yeah.
He's top of the list now for the Patriots. And it's someone who's got some gravity to him to free up one-on-ones. And, fingers crossed that Christian Barmore comes back. If he does, you're looking at one of the best defensive tackle tandems in the entire league. And a small thing that he talked about Thursday, was his versatility in the defensive line. And no guy is going to tell you, I can only do this one thing. I'm really great at it, but this is just kind of my thing unless they're a punter or a kicker. And even then they might be like, oh, I can kick off too. The point is, I love that for the Patriots, who have long made a living defensively out of putting players in different positions and, creating value from that versatility where he could line up as a 5 technique if they want to suddenly go into some odd fronts, or you just put him as a 3 technique, or maybe over the nose, or even have guys hovering over the A gaps in this kind of double mug look. And you're like, what do I do with 300-pound Christian Barmore, Milton Williams, my left and right? We might find out. Like, I like that for him because you want them as a team that's a little bit lower on talent to not only add a blue chip player like him, but be able to generate whatever they can schematically with that versatility to make up for the fact that sometimes you just can't line up and win until you add more players like him. So I'm with you. Like, it was Milton Williams or bust, it sounds like. Did you see the reporting around the Chris Godwin pursuit basically making them fork over a blank check to Milton Williams?
I did see a little bit of that, yeah.
Yeah, $29 million for Chris Godwin as a receiver-starved Patriots beat reporter. I would have said fine, but it's also insane, and I don't think it's the wrong move as much as desperation and falling in love or like cardinal sins of free agency, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where you never want to get carried away, but when you are a team like this that had just so much money again, and it's not like you are, bringing in like a Jonathan Allen or something where you're throwing a bunch of money to shore up the interior defensive line, but you're doing it on a 30-year-old. This is a 26-year-old who, if he is, I think, put in the right system, probably still has a little bit more to give and some more development that he could get out of this. Again, he's a top 4 paid defensive tackle now. So three. Yeah. So I don't think you're not going to exceed what you are paying him here. Like, he's not going to give a performance that is exceeding that contract. But I think there is, potential where just because of what he is able to do, it's not going to be, that bad of a deal. Because I think there's multiple ways you can work around it and get value out of that.
All right. Least favorite signing.
So it was Harold Landry, but just based on how much they were giving out. But as of recording, I don't think we have the full details of what that actual contract is or what the structure is. So that makes me think it's not quite as big as what it was, but still the fact that they were so aggressive to go out and get Harold Landry as this first thing that they needed to do just because he's been on a Mike Vrabel defense, especially after kind of a down year that he had, only a 7.6% pressure rate last year. That was even worse on early downs. He's been a guy that's run high on the amount of sacks he has per quarterback hit. So he doesn't necessarily have to be getting to the quarterback a lot to be actually getting sacks, which usually is something that regresses to the mean a little bit, but he is someone who has run about, 50%. Usually the league average is around like 43 or so. I think he was about at like 60% of his hits turned into sacks last year. So he's someone that I think he still got off the line pretty quickly, but I think it's just not someone who you should be relying on. I think is like your number one pass rusher, or that much of a priority in free agency. But I think with some of the other things they did, he'll fit in. I'm just not sure if that was really worth kind of the what they did to get him and how just quickly they made sure that came in, because I'm not really sure who they were bidding against.
Yeah, that was my line last time talking about this with Harold Landry. And so the framework is 3 for 43.5, and there's $26 million guaranteed. So you still don't have the cash flow. And you know, I'm sure that third year they can certainly get out if they want to. It's not going to be year 1. It's not going to be year 2. Who are you bidding against? His 4.8% pass rush win rate, according to PFF, lowest among edge defenders. And as a guy who does have that good get off, it kind of makes me go, okay, does it just mean everyone knows he's like a one-pitch pitcher and like this is what's coming, and you kind of set against that? And I know he's got a decent ghost, rush move and some counter, and he's a veteran, but this felt as much like anything a culture signing. We didn't have a lot of leverage. We know you. We know what you're going to bring in. You can set the edge against the run, great, but that's not what you get $43.5 million for. So I'm with you. I've come around a little bit on Robert Spillane, who I don't know if you watched much last year in Vegas, because looking at his profile, it was too similar to me for Juwan Bentley, even though Bentley's 2 or 3 inches taller, 30 pounds heavier, is like run first, downhill, smart guys. What do you make of Spillane, though? Because I think it went from like a C to a C plus on that deal as the 7th highest paid linebacker by average annual value, understanding the market for off-ball linebackers is going up. But what do you think of him?
Yeah, he's a guy that I think is going to be pretty interesting in this defense. I think he can do some things well. I think can be, pretty aggressive, kind of coming downhill. It's been up and down in coverage a little bit. So I think you can kind of, wonder what that's going to get you. But I think, like you said, it just kind of hit into this, this market of off-ball linebackers where they all did get paid. So it definitely did go to something where he probably got a little more than, if he was a free agent last year, probably would not have gotten quite as much, just because the market did not go for linebackers that much. But when you kind of look at what he did, just kind of a guy who's just going to flow to the ball. Last year made a tackle on 15.3% of his snaps, tackle on 22.5% of his run defense snaps. So it's just a guy who is constantly flowing to the ball, which I think is going to help. And that's something that probably, just kind of clogs up the middle a little bit. Will certainly be a piece that they needed. I don't think it's going to be something where it completely, fixes what they need at linebacker. You can probably put another piece or two there, and might not want him quite in coverage quite as much, but I think it is going to be definitely a useful signing in that defense.
Yeah, he for reasons that I think are obvious enough, will be a fan favorite in New England. If it's a historical prototype at that position, Robert Spillane. So one of the most common questions I get about covering the Patriots has nothing to do with Mike Vrabel or Drake Maye. It's how did you get into the business? My first line is always the same. I was a football kid in a basketball town. Grew up in Storrs, Connecticut, home of the Yukon Huskies, went to high school there, went to college there. And as much as I still love football more than any other sport, we got a ways to wait for football. And in the meantime, you will find me at Celtics games. You will find me watching college basketball games. You will find me looking at playoff tickets for the lowest possible price guarantee so I can get back into the building and watch more hoops. And you should too. Thanks to our friends at Gametime, you get that same lowest price guarantee of any place on the secondary market. So much so that if you find a lower price to a game you want to go to, you come back to Gametime and they give you 110% of the credit, a feature you will not find anywhere else. Also at Gametime, the super deal. Deals that just suddenly pop up as you're browsing on the app, and then boom, it's the best deal you will find anywhere. I'm talking about seats, I'm talking about prices, even seat view, which by the way, if you go to Gametime, you can click and see the difference going to the garden between section 319, row 8, or section 326, row 4. It's all there on Gametime, including that lowest price guarantee. So wherever you want to go, a basketball game, a show, a concert, anything, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app today, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Again, download the Gametime app today, create an account, use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Just do it. Download Gametime today, because what time is it? Gametime. All right, what would you do at number 4? The draft is going to sneak up on us, I think, because it's a little earlier than April than most years, and we're full of free agency and owners meetings around the corner. Love this dead lull in April, but boom, the draft is going to be here. If the boom happened today, if the draft was tonight, what are you doing if you're the Patriots at number 4?
I think the good thing is I'm not sure they could go wrong on some of their options, because I think if Travis Hunter's there, man, just take him and figure it out. I know cornerback is a little crowded now after the Carlton Davis signing, but I don't know, man. You have Travis Hunter there. You can throw him somewhere on that defense to figure it out. He's probably wide receiver 1 on this team also, if he is currently on the roster. So I think that is certainly something they can do. I'd toy with potentially, number 4 is high for a wide receiver, but Ted McMillan is kind of exactly what this team does need. He does profile as the type of X receiver that 1, the Patriots need, 2 is not very existent in this draft class. I think there are a lot of fun receivers in this class, but I think some people are definitely looking down on the quality of it just because there is not that prototype number 1 guy who's going to win often on the outside, be able to line up in that position. But Ted McMillan is that guy. He's not going to blow you away with speed, but I think he does have kind of that, body control and the route running ability where he is going to get open, a place where I think he's going to be a trustworthy option for a quarterback. And I think that is something you can definitely help build an offense around. So I wouldn't be opposed to going there. And I think then you can, take, any of the offensive linemen too. I think the Patriots, especially if 2 quarterbacks go in the first 3 picks, which I'm not sure they will. I think Cam Ward goes 1, and then I think it's kind of very open there. But I think the Patriots, with the way it's going to fall, I think they're going to have some good options. I think you probably take defensive tackle off the table now because of and now you got Milton Williams in. So I think if you offensive lineman of your choice, or Tet or Travis Hunter, I think any one of those I think is going to help the Patriots in 2025 and beyond.
Yeah, I'm getting closer to the Tet McMillan camp. T-Mac is always close to him, apparently, call him. And also just people who want to avoid, all hell, saying Tetaroa McMillan. But I I would prefer that in a trade back scenario where
Yeah,
that's still my
if you
option
can do
today.
that, absolutely, yeah.
And it's not only just because there's a cluster of players, whether it's him, maybe Armand Membu, maybe you want to get in the Jalen Carter business, even though he's still even lighter than Harold Landry, who's an undersized edge, who obviously we just talked about. You give a ton of money to. It's that you can add some capital, third round pick, maybe a late second, when you move back. And then what I would love to see them do, and I don't know if you have any guys in this range, move back into the end of the first round for either that receiver, even though there aren't that many X's, or a Josh Simmons at offensive tackle or Josh Connerly. Like just get into the business of getting these players under 5-year deals with the team option, obviously with the 5th-year option for first round picks, and do that. Like if you're happy with a bunch of options at 4, assuming Travis Hunter's not there, move back. Maybe they can't. That's where I'm at. But if they have to stick and pick, I'm with you as McMillan, even though it feels a little high, because I just like the depth better at tackle if they do make that jump, rather than taking an Armand Membu or Will Campbell, who I'm just out on, I'm so sorry, then having to find a receiver and make him play a spot at X that might not be best suited for him.
Yeah, it's tough. I think it's when you kind of look at some of the guys who have been taken in the top 5 for receivers over the past, few years, you're probably getting a better receiver in other drafts than you would be getting Tet McMillan. So I think it is a little tough to bring that down. And the trade back for a wide receiver, I think is interesting, because that's probably where the sweet spot for some of this class is going to be. I feel like this is kind of more like the 2023 class, where nobody really liked the receivers, but they all ended up being like pretty useful guys, kind of guys in the back end, like Jordan Addison went kind of like late in the first, in the 20s. And that's something like, if you could go back and get like a Matthew Golden there, like he's good, man. And he's really fun to watch, like, explosive. I think he's the guy who can be versatile, play inside and outside. So if you can get someone like that, I think is certainly going to be a good addition to that. I think among like all college receivers was like second in the rate of plays that went for 20 or more yards, and just does it in different ways. So if you could trade back, get a decent haul and still get a guy like that, even if it's in the teens, I think that would be worth it for him. If you're trying to target a wide receiver there, still build some draft capital, get some extra picks, I could see that being a path they go down to.
Yeah, I'm curious too how they see him as a fit. Like, Matt Collins fills the big bodied theoretically. I mean, you don't want Matt Collins playing 90% of your offensive snaps, but if they see Golden as someone who can play X, and he's become kind of like a draft Twitter favorite, right? Like I know I like what I see on tape, but it's not to the love that I've seen checking people that I trust, you, Nate Tice, other folks. So it's interesting because they'll need to decide, and Josh McDaniels, I think, will have a big say in this, where they move receivers at all 3 spots on a drive-to-drive basis, play-to-play basis. Are we comfortable with him playing X? How much does that matter to us in a way that I think would have mattered in the old system a little bit last year without Vrabel, a defined X receiver? Maybe a little bit less so with McDaniels. There was something else that I had. Oh, I love that description of the 2023 draft class for the receivers. Like, nobody liked us, the 2023, but it's true. And they can be like, F you, it didn't matter. I want that idea of a t-shirt passed around, or someone like Jordan Addison wearing that in week 2 next year doing an interview.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, there were, guys who went up and down. That was what the Quentin Johnson, so there were, there were hits and misses, but then, you look in the second round, Jaden Reed was going in the second round. There were some useful players there who were good NFL players, but because they weren't, those prototypical number 1 guys, I think that class was looked down on, but you still had a lot of good players. And I think that's what this receiver class is going to be. Even if, you don't like the quality up top, there's no one you're going to try to run your offense through, potentially outside of Tet. I think there are going to be some good players. So if you want to be taking strikes in the second and third round, I think that could be a sweet spot too, to take a couple of swings there.
One guy is going to be taking a lot of swings, Drake Maye. What does he look like next season? What do you see from Drake Maye?
Man, I'm going, add me to like the group that really likes Drake Maye. He's good, man. He really is. Like he was the second best rookie quarterback last year, and I think that objectively. Yes. There are going to be some Denver fans that are not going to listen to this, but they would be very upset by hearing that. But But he was very clearly the second best quarterback last year, and I think, and not even just grading him on a scale. I think if you look at something like an EPA per play and success rate, he was actually the second best quarterback behind Jaden Daniels. So the way he is able to, I think, kind of manipulate his situation, and kind of like I said earlier, the way he can avoid sacks when he is under pressure. And obviously, you would like him to be under pressure a little less than he was last year. But the fact that he was still able to make some a competent offense at times with what he was surrounded by, I think just only brings his ceiling up, and the potential is there. He's a guy who I think is going to be, he's very smart. I think the accuracy is going to be there. I think he knows when he should take shots, when he shouldn't. I think the athleticism is something he can probably build on a little bit more. That's one of the things that I have seen talked about a little bit, and I'm interested in the designed run game with him. I think that's something that was kind of left on the table last year. Kind of saw what Josh McDaniels did the Cam Newton year, when that's kind of really the only thing they had going for them at the time. I'm going to be interested to see if that's a little bit there. So I think just dynamically, I don't think there's anything Drake Maye can't do. And I'm very excited to see what year 2 is going to look like, because I think it's going to be really good.
I think so too. And I heard from a coach at the combine that he could be top 5 as soon as 2026. And I think that's probably a little far fetched, just because you got guys in the top 3 who are not going anywhere, and Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. And then you got room for one, and you'd have plenty of guys who would be like, oh, that's me. But when you talk about the QB run game, that's an element I think fairly they worried about in terms of him taking hits, because he did have one concussion, at least against the Jets. There might have been another one in there. And so now this is your franchise quarterback, but the diversity of that run game, it doesn't just have to be zone read. It doesn't have to be QB draw. You can run power in there, all these bash concepts, and invert them. Like, there's a way to keep him a little bit safer and keep it spiced up. The other part that I like for him with the Josh McDaniels component is the quick game. Like, that quick game for New England, they lived on, obviously, for years. And it helps with Tom Brady at the controls, but you saw it with Mac Jones. And this was not an RPO-heavy system, which Drake is very comfortable with. But it's to say that you don't have to go to RPO just to get the ball out of his hands quickly. They're able to manufacture a lot of yards underneath without going through the same well over and over again. And I'm not just talking about screens or your basic, slant flats. Like, McDaniels has got all those tricks in his bag if they do need to offset the protection that he's not been afforded to protect him through play design. And that part has me excited for him. But we need the easy thing is to say a hype train, but I don't know if there's like a Drake hive, or there's like a May mania, like something, or just Mania. But we'll get you in. We'll
there
get
we go. Okay.
Your card carrying member here soon. All right.
Yeah. I absolutely will feel that way. I'm honored to be a part of that group. It was very hard to watch him last year and not just kind of project what that really could be, because I think just in the surroundings, I think he was good on his own without grading on a curve last year. And I think what they are going to be able to do to potentially make it a little better this year is certainly going to be it's gonna be fun to watch. I have some high expectations, so hopefully they can put some other things around him where it is something where it is going to be a meaningful jump in play, and that at least will be production wise, even if we kind of see it next year, which is definitely a possibility, where we see how good he is, but it doesn't necessarily go into stats or production, just because there is still a little left to be desired with what's around him.
Well, let's nail this down, because I said I wouldn't go top 5 soon for him, but I could see it. Could you see Drake Maye pushing for a spot in the top 10, 12 next year? Let's see, like in the fat part of the bell curve, most likely outcomes for the Patriots offense. Where does he land next year? Where do you see him?
Yeah, I think when you kind of look at what the top 10 is right now, that's a fluctuating piece, right? Like you said, it's hard to say he's going to be a top 5 quarterback just because we kind of know those top 5 guys. And unless something goes terribly wrong with them, that's kind of situated. But if you kind of look at 6 through 12, it's a bunch of guys that you kind of wonder about that are up and down. That's where you would place, CJ Stroud or, Matt Stafford. I would have said Jordan Love was there at times last year. It's where, Kyler probably sits, right? But these are guys that can be very good at times, a little inconsistent. So I would absolutely place Drake Maye, potentially in that spot, and being able to play within that group, it's probably going to be your personal taste, but probably be how you would rank those guys in that tier. But I would not be surprised to see him like kind of play in that tier, have him be in the production of some of those guys. And that's going to, sit you from, is 6 to 12, which I think is a place where a lot of quarterbacks right now could potentially land. But he's good. He's going to be up there because I think he does have that talent. And I think kind of what we saw from his rookie year, I think there still is more to give.
So the clip notes of this well-reasoned, thought out, reasonable, qualified statement is yes, Drake Maye will be top 12 next year.
There we go. Yes. Yeah. I'll spend 5 minutes on qualifiers and try to give not actually give a take and hedge on it. But yes, he will absolutely, be there within the year because he's good.
I love it. We're going to cut that and send it to Patriots First Take, and they will be spreading this out everywhere here as you make your audition. All right, last one. I have no idea where you're going with this. I asked for a random Patriots take. I literally said in the email, go anywhere with this. What's on your mind? What interests you? What do you think about this team in a way that I don't think we're going to hear from most people here? What do you got?
Okay, I'm going to go a little bold here, and that might not be. I could see this as a top 5 pass defense next year.
Wow.
Because of, I think the pass rush is certainly going to help. Now, I'm not the biggest Carlton Davis fan individually. I probably wouldn't have given him that contract. I think he's been a little overrated due next to like his performance over the past couple years. But you get someone like that who can play as aggressively as he does next to Christian Gonzalez, who I think is he's probably a top 5 cornerback in the league right now.
Yes.
Do you have those two guys on the outside? I think that just kind of expands so much of what you can do on defense. If you want to be kind of playing zone, play sides on some plays, you can do that. If you want to be aggressive, play some press man coverage. You have 2 guys now who can do that. I think with what they're going to be having kind of going on in the back end is certainly going to help. And you are allowed to now, because you have so much trust in your corners, that opens up what a Duggar it can do on the back end and things like that. You can move some of those pieces around. So the fact that they have those 2 corners who can do anything, I think just completely expands what they're going to be able to do. Again, I came into last year with high expectations for what they could potentially do. The fact that they were able to hold up as well in coverage as they did, this year at times when teams were, kind of picking at Jonathan Jones a lot and giving up some big plays. I don't see them giving up as many big plays in that area this year. So I think this has a chance to be a really good pass defense, which I think can kind of set the table for the rest of the defense and have it be a fun unit to be watching next year.
Yeah, I like it. I think that is the ceiling. It will be interesting to see how they guard the middle of the field, right? Because for so long, this has been a team that played, a lot of post safety, single high stuff, and they packed the middle, and that's how they did it. You'd have Kyle Duggar in the box and Jabril Peppers in the box, and Mike Vrabel's coming with a little bit more of a quarters background, or at least that's what he ran in Tennessee. But when you have, like you said, 2 corners where there's nowhere to hide, and Carlton Davis will give up some catches, everybody does, but you're not throwing at Christian Gonzalez. Well, then the middle of the field's where you got to go. So do the Patriots play a little bit more split safety and keep the middle of the field open? Do they lean into, we can trust our guys on islands? Because to me, the rate at which he played man coverage last year in Detroit, Terrell Williams was there. They saw what he did, fits his skill set. That's what I would do. I'd be like, yeah, single up. And if we need to throw numbers at the run game, we're doing that at the same time. Like I like it. They'll need better pass rush. Obviously 28 sacks last year, worse in the league, but Milton Williams is going to help there. We'll see what they can cook up schematically, but we're getting some people's hopes up here in mid-March. We might, I don't know if we're going to have you back if you're welcome to come back on the podcast anytime. But I don't know. You know what? F it. This is the time for this, right? Like hopes and dreams and free agency, and come on, baby. The people have been too low. The Patriots have been too bad for too long. It's time for some fresh air. And I think you just brought it.
Right. And it's early enough where mid-March, by November, I hope no one remembers that I said that.
Yeah. Awesome. He is Dan Pizzuta. Follow him. Please be smarter about football. Understand more about football. The Patriots, the league at large, at DAN, Dan, PIZZUTA. And we got through a whole episode and nobody called you Danny Pizza. Not bad, right?
There we go. Except for the NFL officially.
That's right. Oh my God. Do you want to tell that story?
Yeah, I mean, we might as well since we got into it. So at the 2024 combine, so last year's combine, I go to pick up my credential, give my name. I can't find it. The guy's searching through all the credentials, asked, who I was with, told him. Yeah, he's, flipping through again, pulls it out. It finds what he thinks is the combine and goes, I want to apologize, and just had like this very sincere, and hands me the credential, and it says Daniel Pizza was officially on my press credential for the combine last year. So yeah, we got a lot of juice out of that week.
Yeah, dating Heifetz squeezing that orange a little bit more. There's no juice left there, but I appreciate relaying the story. Appreciate your insights coming on, man. This was great. It flew by, which to me is always a good sign of a good episode. And just nice to sit back and zoom out and like talk about them at large. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me on. It was great.
Over more than 2 decades and 2 separate dynasties, the Patriots defense has become synonymous with great linebacker play. Unfortunately, last season, key losses to both the coaching staff and roster left the unit vulnerable against both run and pass. Fortunately, new head coach Mike Vrabel and his staff have made one key move to the roster in one of their first moves of free agency that could be the difference maker and allow New England to get back to its winning ways at the second level. Christian Ellis was retained and could carve out a role on passing downs, but the Patriots first hinted at a stylistic change when they signed former Raider Robert Spillane. Now, Spillane mugging the line of scrimmage usually meant that he was going to drop into coverage, but as he showed against the Saints, he's also a pretty opportunistic pass rusher. The Saints match 6 potential rushers with 6 blockers, but the Raiders only send 4 players on a simulated or sim pressure. Despite having more blockers than Vegas has rushers, a twist from the linebackers in the middle makes Shane Lameau late to his block. This allows Spillane to catch Lameau off guard on a pick and get in Spencer Rattler's face on a high incompletion. Spillane would reach the quarterback one drive later, capitalizing on another missed assignment for an unblocked sack. Even when Spillane doesn't get to the quarterback, like any seasoned rusher, he knows he has to get his hands up. That instinct led to a game-changing drive stop during Week 2's upset in Baltimore. Facing 3rd and 5 down 7 points, Spillane rushes the left guard on an all-out blitz. He maintains vision on the quarterback after getting solid knockback, then sees Lamar Jackson wind up to throw and bats the pass. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to become a member of Patriots Press Pass on YouTube to get full access to videos like this and much more really fun content. I cannot wait for you to see it.